Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Victoria City Council meeting. I call to order the regular meeting of the Victoria City Council. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda this evening is announcements. Please come on in, grab a seat. All meetings of the City Council are open to the public and held in the council chambers at City Hall unless otherwise noted. If you're interested in speaking at a council meeting, we encourage you to contact the city clerk for more information. The city will hold its next budget workshop on Monday, August 28th at 5 p.m. During this workshop, we'll discuss fees and charges for 2024, as well as have an opportunity to hear from each of our departments on budget pressures, cost savings, and operational efficiencies. The city will consider its maximum tax levy during the regular city council meeting on Monday, September 11th at 6:30 p.m. The levy that council will consider will be the maximum levy that can be adopted in 2024. The council will not approve a final budget until December, so that levy can go down, but it cannot exceed what was adopted at the maximum tax levy. Additionally, on Monday, September 11th, prior to the budget discussion, the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District will present an update on the work and the projects that they are doing and have planned for the future. This will take place at 6 p.m. on September 11th. In other announcements, there are still a few more weeks of our Concerts in the Park series. Come on down to Bayfront Park every Wednesday through August 9th and visit the city's website to see the season's lineup. Night to Unite, formerly known as National Night Out, is on August 1st from 5 to 6 p.m. Registration for a visit from police or fire is now full, but you can add your party to the waiting list. And if there's time in the evening, we'll try and have a crew swing by. To learn more about Night to Unite and add your neighborhood party to the waiting list, visit the city's website or reach out to our communications and public engagement manager, Kendra Grawl. For all our bicycle enthusiasts, the annual Tour de Tonka will take place on August 5th. Bikers will be riding through areas of the city, so be aware and drive safely. And that event is hosted by the Minnetonka Public Schools. Our next order of business, there are no proclamations this evening, so our next order of business is to adopt the final agenda. Council, can I get a motion to adopt the final agenda?
Motion to adopt final agenda.
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Before we continue on, I'm going to turn it over to our city manager, Ms. Dana Hardy. We have some new staff members to meet this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, we do. So each quarter, we've been introducing to our community and to the council our new staff. And so this quarter, we have 2 new staff who have joined the team, and I'm going to invite them to just swing up to the podium and spend just a second really briefly introducing yourselves and then quickly telling people what you do. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Paige Whalen. I started with the city in May. I'm now the City of Victoria's Communications Specialist. I am working with Kendra Grawl on all things communications. We are super busy this summer with all of our summer events, so producing any comms needed for that. The City of Victoria helps out with Inky at the farmers market, so we've been busy there, and we've been doing a bunch of community outreach spotlights, so if you haven't seen that yet, check that out. We have art next week, and it's going to be super fun. This week, we'll see. It's going to be super hot this week. But I have also been working on updating permits for the city, doing just making sure we're following with consistency and accuracy with those. I've also been doing a lot of website updates to make that place accurate for all city residents and community members to go and find accurate information there, and a bunch of other things, fun comm stuff. So
Terrific. Well, thank you, Paige. Welcome.
thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name's Brian McCann. I'm the new city planner. I'm in charge of interpreting the zoning code and processing new development applications for the city as part of the community development team. So, thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, Brian. You got work to do tonight, so hang around. All right. I think that's everybody. We'll move on to our next item, which is the open forum. This is the opportunity for anyone to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda or not in application form that will be coming to the council at a future date. No one has registered to speak in advance at the open forum this evening, but if there is anyone in the audience that would like to address the council on an item that's not on the agenda and not in application form, please approach the podium at this time. All right, one last call. Anybody for open forum on an item that's not on the agenda? All right. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the next item, which is our consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are routine, administrative, and do not require deliberation, or are housekeeping items that are required by law. Consent agenda items are approved with one vote unless someone requests an agenda item to be considered separately. Ms. Hardy, does staff wish to pull anything from the consent agenda this evening?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Any members of the council that wish to pull anything from the consent agenda?
No, Mayor.
Or any member of the audience that is looking to pull something from the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, I will take a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the regular agenda. The first item this evening is item 6.1, which is a public hearing for a temporary noise permit for St. Victoria Catholic Church Sunset Fest. Presenting this evening is our associate planner, Will Busheger. Did I say that right, Will?
Almost got it, Madam Mayor.
Please tell me, correct me.
It's Boohager. Weirdly enough, the
Boohager.
C is silent.
Boohager. Well, what's it doing there? All right. Mr. Boohager, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As stated, I am presenting the temporary noise permit for 8228 Victoria Drive tonight. As with all temporary noise permits, it'll have to go through a process where a notice has to be given out 350 feet to all residents within the subject area. And per section chapter 12-26, the council must hold a public hearing for the temporary noise permit in place. As stated, the temporary permit request is for St. Victoria. They're hoping to have Sunset Festival happen on August 26th, and they're requesting for the temporary noise permit so they can have an outdoor band play from 6:30 to 10:30 p.m. So that is the request that they are asking for, going 30 minutes past the noise ordinance.
Is this address in the church parking lot, or is it in?
It's going to be happening in the parking lot. They're going to have almost a tent over the band itself to help take care of any weather if anything happens. But that it's going to be happening in the parking lot itself.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep, no problem at all. As for temporary noise permits, there is criteria that has to come into play here that be granted by the council. And a temporary noise permit may be permitted that may not be in compliance with the code if the activity, operation, or noise will be temporary in duration. The cost of abatement will be reasonably high. The measures to necessarily abate will have any ecological or conditions of safety. No other reasonable alternatives available to the applicant, and the anticipated noise produced is going to be for entertainment, public interest value, or any other health or welfare. So staff believes the temporary noise permit will have minimal adverse impacts to the city, and we're hoping for a recommendation from the city council to approve the temporary noise permit. And staff recommends that council conducts a public hearing and approves the temporary noise permit for 8228 Victoria Drive for the durations of 6:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. on Saturday, August 26, 2023.
Perfect. Thank you. With that, I will now open the public hearing. If there's anyone here in the audience this evening who wishes to speak to this item, please approach the podium at this time. This is for the noise permit for St. Victoria Church. If there's anyone who would like to speak to this issue, please approach the podium. And last call. All right. I now close the public, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Council, any further discussion on this item?
I just want to disclose something.
Councilmember Reef.
Yes.
Right, I'm sorry.
I'm a member of the Sunset Fest staff, so volunteering to help out with that. So just wanted to let everybody know that I'm,
All right, terrific. Any other discussion on this item?
Just a question for staff, did we have any concerns about, of the three people within 350 feet?
No, staff has not received any complaints or any other feedback from the public from the notices going out 350 feet from the subject area.
Excellent, thank you.
Mr. Buhager. All right. Anything else? Seeing nothing, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve a temporary noise permit for 8228 Victoria Drive for the playing of outdoor music between the hours of 6:30 PM and 10:30 PM on Saturday, August 26th, 2023.
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on, the next item on our agenda is a public hearing. Item 6.2 is a public hearing for the TIF business subsidy for the Roars development. Presenting this evening is Community and Economic Development Director Jen Brewington, and our financial advisor from Northland, Ms. Tammy Amdahl, is with us this evening. Ladies, the floor is yours. Jen, let's start with you.
All right, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So tonight is a public hearing for Tax Increment Financing District number 1-9. So this is a development area. It's right off of Highway 5 and Rose Street. The downtown master plan incorporated within Victoria's comprehensive plan identifies the subject property as a mix of retail and mixed uses. The proposal has 125 market rate apartments, 258 parking spaces, 148 of those are structured parking stalls, 76 are service lot parking stalls, 34 are additional public parking stalls on Rose Street, and approximately 8,700 square feet of retail commercial space. And staff does believe that the proposal is in line with the downtown master plan and meets the city council's strategic goals for the site. I did want to make a note that the tax increment plan is based on approximately 130 units. And the reason for that is that the TIF plan documents typically describe projects or a number of housing units as approximately. And that's because there can be changes made from when the TIF plan is drafted and shared with the other taxing jurisdictions. So just a note on that piece. So a little bit about TIF. So the developer is requesting TIF assistance for the project. TIF is a financing method to capture increase in value from new development. Tax increments are generated by an increase in property taxes resulting from the increase in taxable market value from the development. Property taxes from the increase in valuation are used to finance or reimburse TIF-eligible project costs. And after the capture of property taxes, when TIF ends, then tax capacity from new development becomes available as tax base to all taxing jurisdictions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tammy.
Ms. Amdahl, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening. I have a few slides to go through here as well. This next slide has a bunch of numbers on it. That's not really the point. This slide is meant to demonstrate how tax increment works at a macro level. So currently, on the parcels that are within the boundaries of the proposed TIF District 1-9 for this current year, generates just under $15,000 of total property taxes to all the taxing jurisdictions, and you can see by city, school district, county. With the establishment of the TIF district, if so approved, and after completion of the project and based upon estimated taxable market value, we don't know today what the county assessor, after it's actually completed and the final project, may value the project at. We can estimate based upon comparable projects and some assumption for change in taxable market value between the current market and the first tax payable year 26. I note that because all of the amounts in that tax increment financing plan are estimates for the planning purposes and to establish a budget pursuant to what's required by state law. So given all that and the assumptions of the value, the total taxes paid in the first year after completion are estimated at about $375,000. With TIF, there is no foregoing payment of real estate taxes. The owner of the property will be responsible for paying all taxes in full when due. If the district is established, of that total real estate tax, approximately $290,000 is estimated to be captured and available for the city to use to assist the project, including the split between how much the city may retain and how much would be paid out to the developer. The middle column in the green, the taxes payable to the taxing jurisdictions, I want to point this out because with the development, the estimated taxes to the taxing jurisdictions is projected to grow from what is today about $15,000 to, let's round up to about $85,000. The reason for that, and the biggest line item, is the school referendum taxes. That cannot be captured for purposes of TIF. That will immediately be payable to the school district, and those are payable based upon the value of the property. The other piece that will change is that there will be a commercial component, the commercial retail. Those taxes are subject to state property tax, which cannot be captured. So that is the reason for the difference. So the community, the school district would immediately enjoy that benefit, but the balance of it would be captured to make the project feasible. I believe I have control over this clicker. We'll try that. So some facts, and TIF, and I've been before the city council before, it gets a little technical, but let's try to break this down. So to establish a tax increment financing district, the city has to meet certain criteria depending on the type of district. As proposed, TIF District 1-9 will be a redevelopment district. That means that certain findings had to be established with respect to substandard buildings and coverage area. The city contracted with the firm LHB to complete that inspection of the property and prepare that report, and I can stand before you today. Those findings are such that this area, those parcels, the buildings on it, will qualify for the establishment of a redevelopment TIF district. 70% of the area is occupied, and more than 50% of those buildings on the property were found to be substandard. The tax increment assumptions, some numbers here. I won't read each of those bullet points, and I went through the total tax that is estimated. As far as value, in those numbers that I shared with you, the estimated taxable market value after completion is approximately $27 million. Again, I will emphasize, we don't know exactly what that value will be until the project is constructed and the assessor values it. I will note that while you are not approving the development agreement tonight with the developer, as proposed, that agreement will establish a minimum value for this project. So not how high it can go, but establish a minimum value. So the city, Northland, and the developer have discussed this estimate, and the developer in concept finds that minimum value to be acceptable, and that informs all of the estimates that are in the tax increment plan. The city may also use increment that will not be paid to the developer to use for other qualified improvements. And I'm going to talk about that when I get to the budget slide here in a moment. The tax increment subject, the estimated average annual taxes, as I noted, approximately the tax increment $330. The developer, as proposed, would receive 97% of the increment until they are to be reimbursed approximately $3,230,000, or until 15 years of the district is reached, whichever occurs first. And the reason I say whichever occurs first, based upon current assumptions, we estimate it would take the full 15 years to reimburse that amount. But if values were higher and more increment was generated sooner, it is possible that the city would reimburse the developer sooner than that 15-year time period. It shall not exceed 15 years. Under terms of an agreement that is not before you tonight, but is the TIF plan provides the framework for this agreement, is that the developer would receive that 97% until 15 years, but it is not a general obligation of the city, meaning if increment is not sufficient to reimburse that full amount, if ultimately you agree to the 3.23 million, there is no obligation after that 15 years. That tax increment financing revenue note would go away at that time. That's an important point. This is not a commitment to make full on that. It's simply that you are pledging increment to the extent that it is available to reimburse the developer the 3.2 million. This slide breaks down what is figure, I believe, 4.1 in the tax increment financing plan. It's a requirement that there be a budget with the total amounts. The TIF plan does not break out how much the city would retain versus the developer. And the reason for that is a decision the city makes when you enter into obligations, TIF development agreements, or you commit those dollars. The TIF plan is at a higher level, so the TIF plan includes the totals only as shown here. But let's break that down on how this might split between the city and the developer. So the total tax increment over the life of the district is estimated, and it's a 26-year duration is what is proposed in the TIF plan, should the city council adopt that this evening, $8.7 million. Of that $8.7 million, it is anticipated that the developer would receive, if it went the full 15 years, $4.5 million. That would include the reimbursement of $3,230,000 of costs, including the land and building acquisition and site improvements. TIF is commonly, as has been the case in Victoria, payable to a developer with interest. That is the difference between the 4.5 and the 3.2. The reason for that is the city is not proposing to provide any upfront assistance to the developer. The developer will have to finance that $3.2 million on their own, incur interest expense with their loan, and the city, under terms of an agreement, would consider then that TIF revenue note to reimburse that with interest. That is a negotiating point. That is not a requirement of state law, but the reason that most cities consider that is because the reason you're considering tax increment financing is to make this project feasible. And but for that assistance and that revenue in order to generate minimum returns and debt service coverage is why interest is considered. So let's get to the middle column, the city portion. Because the TIF district plan provides for 26 years, and as proposed, the developer would receive only 15 years of assistance, there's the potential for increment to be available for the city to leverage and use for other qualified improvements. Other qualified improvements is a term used by the state auditor's office, and that's why it's in the city's TIF plan as such. That refers to parking improvements, street improvements, sidewalk improvements, other public improvements that the city would incur potentially costs. The city council, should you approve this district with a 26-year duration, has the ability to ultimately, it becomes the framework to decide later we will only do 15 years, or if upon consideration of how those dollars may be used, could go the full 26-year duration and leverage that future increment. The city's increment would not be generated until years 16 through 26. Because the developer will receive 97% of the increment in the first 15 years. So that's a detail of the budget that is included in the plan. The last point before I go on, the city is also able to use increment to pay interest expense. That's true whether you issue general obligation bonds to finance an improvement or you finance improvements to be paid from TIF from interfund loans, which the city has also done in its history. The terms for the assistance to the developer, the TIF plan for the district, as I've said a few times, provides the framework. Tonight, you are not being asked to enter into the contract with the developer. You are being asked after the public hearing to consider a resolution that would establish the TIF district and approve the TIF plan and approve the interfund loan. It does not obligate the city to draw on that interfund loan or to provide those. It simply provides that framework. The city is in the process of finalizing the terms with the developer for tax increment assistance, as well as their final plating process is underway. As I noted, 3, that you can enter into the agreement with the developer after you approve the TIF. And then the final plat for the project is proposed to be considered at the August 28th or the September 11th meeting, pending final information from the developer. I believe that may have been the last slide. That was. Mayor, Council, tax increment financing gets complex. As if you had a chance to read through the plan, there's various rules and regulations and language included in there. But at its very simplest level, it is about a decision, the but-for finding. For a project to move forward, can you make the finding that but for this assistance, this project would not move forward? There was a memo in your packet from Northland from myself. We have completed a financial analysis of the developer's application. And in our opinion, in my opinion, based upon that information and the assumptions within the TIF plan, that it is reasonable to assume that this project as proposed would not move forward but for the TIF assistance within the reasonably foreseeable future. It's not that nothing would ever happen on that site, it's simply that this project as proposed would not move forward. With that, Mayor, Council, I'm happy to answer your questions now or following the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Is there, I want to give the council an opportunity to ask Ms. Amdahl any questions, burning questions they have at this point. So council questions. Yeah, Councilmember Gunderson, please.
School referendum link, is it linked, it goes up and down, it follows, if a referendum goes down, that dollar amount will change?
That is correct.
So if it goes up, it'll change. How does that change within the do we capture more then? So if the district isn't taking as much, then that whatever's left goes into the TIF fund? Help me understand a little bit about that.
Good question. So the school referendum taxes, or referendum taxes in period, in the case of Victoria, there's not a city referendum, cannot be captured within tax increment districts. So as that referendum may be renewed or changed over a 26-year period, that would impact the real estate taxes payable from this project. It would have no impact on the tax increment financing. It would not increase or decrease the amount of revenue that is captured.
Okay. So that dollar amount is set just depending, it fluctuates just depending on the referendum itself, and then everything else is dependent on the tax increment.
You are correct in that summary.
Councilmember Gunderson, anything else? Any other questions for Ms. Amdahl at this point? All right, stay close. I'm sure something will pop up. All right. Before I open up the public hearing, we have asked folks, if you want to speak this evening, to please sign up, and I'll call you to the podium. That'll help us keep things moving along here this evening. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and that you don't repeat anything that's already been said. So with that, staff, do I have a list of who wanted to speak?
Yeah.
And if you haven't had a chance to, there's another sign-up sheet. Please feel free to sign up if you have not already done so. Okay. With that, I will now open up the public hearing, and the first person on the list is Mr. Terry Hartman. Mr. Hartman, please.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. Terry Hartman, 1750 Tower Boulevard, representing my ownership group in 4 of our buildings in downtown Victoria. We attended the preliminary, or the public hearing for the preliminary plat for the Roars project on I think it was June 26th or somewhere in June 20th maybe. Mm-hmm. And a couple questions that we had that night, even though that night was maybe for land use items, not necessarily for TIF, but questions that I had that night were related to TIF. So that's why we were invited to come to this meeting, and we were kind of cut off at that meeting. But I have to kind of go back a little bit to that meeting to say,
sure,
I testified generally in support of the Roars project, and representing some of the other folks that we've been in front of you in the past, some of the downtown business property owners, some of our businesses that are tenants, generally in support of the Roars project. Well-designed, well-done, you know, well-parked, beautifully the aesthetic design of it, good job. Again, we return, though, to this idea of parking. We've talked an awful lot about parking, talked too much about parking in downtown Victoria, but here we are again tonight at this public hearing where it's a little bit appropriate to talk about that. Again, don't want to dive too deep into the parking numbers, but again, the project that you approved, or that was approved the night of the public hearing, was short of the required parking according to the ordinance. However, modeling that approval after the Victoria Flats, which was modeled in the same way, it was approved short of parking, but at the same time, there was a TIF component to it that came back to the city. 25% of the tax increment from day one came back to the city to help mitigate that shortage. So when the project opens on day one, we hope it's full, and we hope it's happy camper tenants, retail tenants, resident tenants. But we're all concerned that when it opens short of parking, that we're going to have some additional strain on the downtown, our downtown public parking system. I know I have 3 minutes, so I have to talk fast. So our concern with what's proposed tonight is that the city, if it's going to be seeking some public parking capacity increases, any of those projects that we may agree on building in the next few years won't be able to be funded with any of this tax increment for 15 years. And what we're asking is it possible to change that schedule so that it's similar to the flats, in that on day one, the community can receive 25% instead of 0, or I think 3% administrative fee. Instead of 3%, that the city receives 25%, and they would get that over the full 26 years of the district. We've spoken with the developer. He seems generally in favor of that, so long as he gets his present value to make the project feasible, his gap that he needs. And we would ask that if this needs to be delayed to go to the next meeting, that a schedule that shows the city receiving 25% from day one be presented to you to take a look at the next step in this. If that's at the next council meeting, or if that's somewhere in this process before you finally approve and commit to what does the community receive and what does the developer receive.
Perfect.
I probably ran over my 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mary Mavison. Next up, on deck, Tom Wortman.
Hello, council
Mavison,
members
welcome.
and honorable mayor. Mary Mavison, Creamery Building, 1729 Victoria Drive. I'm going to be piggybacking a little bit of what Terry said. We just think that there's a great opportunity when the council does tax increment financing to be able to take 25% of that, like you did for the flats, and that went to help the downtown parking. And they did that on a 26-year TIF note. You can take a look at that note. We presented it at a previous council meeting. And then 75% would end up going to the developer. Money today for the city in hand, 25% over the course of the 26 years, to be able to get that first 15 full years helps not have to have as much financing expense. The city will have to identify a project. We're hoping that we take a look that it's going to be a qualified improvement project that includes parking, because that's what the downtown needs. And that's going to have to get done, I think, within approximately 5 years. And so instead of financing that project and not receiving one dime until year 16, we, the business owners, hope that the city council will take a look at an increment structure that does 25% to the city each year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wortman, you're next.
Council, Madam Mayor, Tom Wortman, 7999 Victoria Drive, Victoria Borough. I think it's important that the council recognizes that we have an exasperating parking problem in downtown Victoria, and it's exasperated more so by our 6 or 7 months of winter and ice and cold. It's important that we do look, as was done at the Flats, that there's dollars that can come immediately from day one with this TIF. It's extremely important. We at Victoria Borough get comments every day, and/or we see cars driving around and driving out that don't come in and visit us. And I know that Winchester and Rye has the same problems. I know that talking with Paul Carlson at VIX, and it's going to be even more so compounded with Victoria House ultimately opening and any other projects, including the 8,700 square feet that comes with this project, which we don't know what that retail will be. So it is extremely important that there's a number that's above $1.5 million that can come within the 26-year TIF period, that we have had conversations with Marty from Roars that he's agreeable to this. So why the city would not be looking at getting dollars from day one and waiting into our 16th year, I don't know that we can survive that. It is difficult, and we need to grow our business. We need to be able to have the customers that are coming in to be able to come in to stay in business. So it's really important to us that the city does look at, as it was patterned with the Flats, that for the 26-year TIF, 25% comes to the city from day one, and the Roars project still gets its present value of the $3,230,000 over a 26-year period versus over a 15-year period. And we really respectfully ask that the council look at that as you move forward. I understand tonight that it's just the TIF district that's being approved and not the aspect that it's a finalization on the 26-year TIF that would, in fact, give the Roars project 15 years of all the money, and the city would be then taking the back end. So we would, again, respectfully request that you look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Wortman.
Thank you.
Up next, Rob Pollock. Did I say that properly?
You did.
Perfect. Mr. Pollock, welcome.
Unrelated to your city person's, Trish Pollock, I think her name was. There you are. Yeah, see, we're unrelated.
Yeah, unrelated, okay.
I live over in Steiger Lake condos, and I'm going back a little bit more basic than the parking discussion. I guess I was here and I heard from all the Roars folks, a couple of them back there, about how their company was all kinds of investors and all multi-million-dollar company and blah, 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 and so forth. So now I'm hearing that, they need $3 to $4 million, and my property taxes are going to go up, and their property taxes are going to get safe enough to, the property taxes are going to safe enough to go pay Roars, and I guess I think that if they're a strong company and if they, have a lot of know-how, then they ought to just do the project and, reap the benefits and whatever. But doing TIF financing seems like a contradictory argument as far as I'm concerned, so.
Thank you, Mr. Pollock. All right. Is there anybody, did we get any other signups? Any other folks in the audience who want to speak to this item? Mr. Wortman.
Mayor, members of the council, there's one final point that I did want to make sure I emphasized, and that is that the dollars that come in for the 25% city share are designated to downtown city parking improvements, not for sidewalks, not for park, not for other areas. We have to deal with the downtown parking issue as its major theme, and I think that's an important part of our request.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wortman. All right. With that, any other comments from the audience? Anyone else wish to speak? Yeah, please.
We need to do some TIF.
Mr. Paulson,
I'm Jim
please.
Paulson. I was on the city council for a while. I am concerned that our interests are aligned, the developer and the city's interests are aligned when it comes to building the project. And then we have this split of revenues. And I'm in favor of the 25% split. But I think has those documents like a train going through time. When you get out there somehow 8 years or 10 years or 18 months, as we saw across the street, the developer decides that it is time to sell or refinance the TIF document. And so he cashes out his money with that. And so what happens to the city's interest? Now, because you have these loans or projects are syndicated by multiple people, they have a great ability to raise money on the front end. If it is syndicated to the wrong people, REITs even, as we're seeing in today's market, it's very hard to raise capital once the project's in place. So I would like to suggest that we consider that the same provision that is included in most commercial mortgage documents, we should have a due on sale clause, or we could have to change the language to fit the TIF district. But I think we shouldn't have to hang out and be the last investor when the first guys in get out cash and they're gone. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Paulson. All right, anyone else want to speak to this item? Last call. All right, with that, I will take a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion.
We have a motion, can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor of closing the public hearing? Indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, council, further discussion. All right, I'll go first. Ms. Amdahl, can I have you come back to the podium here? I have a couple questions for you. In regard to the 26-year request, I know you don't have those numbers probably in front of you, but what does that look like to, let me see if I can ask this question in the right way. Tonight, we're not certifying the numbers, we're just establishing the district, correct?
That's correct.
So is there time between now and the amount of time that we have to adopt the schedule, if I'm using those words right, to explore another scenario, like a 26-year scenario? Is there time to do that?
There is time to do that, Madam Mayor, with respect to the agreement with the developer.
Okay.
Tonight, the plan is drafted, unless the council makes a motion to change it, is based upon a 26-year duration, and it is based upon the maximum estimated tax increment that would be available given the assumptions. So that provides the framework. When you enter into the TIF agreement with the developer, that will set the terms, meaning are they getting 15 years? Are they going to get 26 years and a split of 75-25 between the developer and the city? That is not being considered tonight. It is simply the approval of the TIF plan based upon a 26-year duration and the estimated maximum TIF that is projected to be generated during that term.
All right, and we've kind of talked through this a little bit, because I had a question about how much time do we have to make a decision about this? So I understand that we have up to 5 years. I mean, we can approve this project and approve the TIF schedule, and we have up to 5 years to make a decision about that last 15 to 26 year increment, if you will. Can you talk a little bit about what that might look like and how that might work?
Yes. So, Madam Mayor, I believe you are asking me about the commitment of the other qualifying improvements, whether the city take that over the last 16 to 26 years or over the duration. That under state law, the city really effectively has 5 years to make a decision to obligate, commit to finance those improvements from the date of certification of the district. The establishment, let's just say that happens tonight, it's likely this district, the request for certification will not happen until June of next year. So you would have you'd have 5 years from next June to make a decision on the use of those other qualifying improvements, and either to issue bonds to finance that or to commit those dollars in some way. I won't go into why that is, it gets a little technical, but to answer your question, yes, the 5 years. The same would be true with Roars and their spending of that 3.2 million, but given their agreement potential for the commencement and completion, that will not be a concern for their side of the ledger. But on the city's ledger, 5 years, you will need to make a decision on what you would do with those funds.
Okay, so if at some point between now and 5 years from June and 5 years from June, we have a project that would qualify, we could do that.
That is correct. It will depend on the facts and the cost of that project and the location too. But yes, this TIF plan would provide that framework to use those dollars that are not obligated to the developer for parking street improvements. And effectively, you have 5 years to make a decision to spend those dollars or to obligate those through financing.
Okay, and then I have another question in regard to geography. So the TIF district that we're establishing tonight is TIF District 9. If we wanted to spend those funds outside of TIF District 9, we would only be able to use 25% of the increment.
That is correct.
So in year 15 to 26, we can only capture 25% of that, but the other 75% goes back to the city, the county, and the school district.
That, to get a little technical, if the city were to obligate that 25% in the first 5 years, that you could maximize that use of that increment to reimburse yourself. So let's just say you issue bonds to finance the city's 25% portion for a project outside the boundaries of the TIF district. That would be an allowable use, and you could maximize the full tax increment available. It is also possible, depending on the location of the project, it may be on a location where there is an existing building that would qualify as substandard. That may present some additional opportunities that, depending on the facts, that you could pursue at that time in enlarging the boundaries of the district that you're creating tonight. Those are facts that you don't have before you tonight. Mm-hmm. But maybe I can leave you with this, Mayor, in answering the question. The approval of the TIF district, the plan as drafted, would provide those opportunities for the city council to have those discussions, to pursue those plans, estimated costs, locations for such projects, and then to determine how you would maximize the revenue. Not to complicate this, but to offer, when you approved TIF District 1-8 for Downtown West, you had a similar conversation. I may have mentioned this earlier. You provided assistance to the developer for a term not to exceed 15 years. You established the district for a 26-year. That plan also has revenue available to the city for other qualifying improvements that the city would have to finance, but then reimburse with future increment. It's possible that you may look at that in combination with the projected funds available for other qualifying improvements in the district that is before you this evening. You have time to make those considerations and to prepare those plans and be consistent with the plan as drafted before you this evening.
Okay. And the framework provides us that flexibility.
It does.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Council, questions?
I just have one question for you.
Councilmember Vansky.
With the establishment of the 75-25 split concept, do the administrative costs all get pushed into the 25% category then at that point in time, so that the actual dollars that are available get reduced, so it's possible that it's really more along the lines of 21%, 20-ish% after you take into those accounts? Or is there an allocation of the administrative cost between the 75% portion and the 25% portion?
Great question. The admin costs come out of that 25%, but in Victoria and how you've managed your districts, I believe the costs are in that $1,000, $2,000 range each year. They are very minimal ongoing administration costs. But yes, to answer your question, the admin costs come out of that 25% portion.
Thank you.
Council.
So just in general, what's
Councilmember
before us
Wright.
tonight is more the framework, right? And when you talk about other improvements, the only thing I've heard is, I've heard parking and street improvements, correct?
That is correct. Improvements that would not qualify, they are prohibited, are park improvements and amenity type improvements. Those are not qualified use of tax increment.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Council, any further discussion? All right, seeing no more discussion, we're looking for a motion to adopt a resolution to approve the establishment of the TIF District 1-9 and adopt the TIF plan. Council, can I get a motion?
Motion to adopt.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh. Councilmember Evansky. Mhm. We have a motion and a second by Councilmember Evansky. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on, our next item is item 6.3, which is the preliminary plat comp plan amendment, CUP variance request, and PUD review for the Amira Active Senior Development and 2 single-family homes. Presenting this evening is our city planner, Brian McCann. Mr. McCann, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Sorry, just a minute here for me to get myself ready. Tonight, we have a request for the Amira project. Their requests include a preliminary plat, a planned unit development, a comprehensive plan amendment, a conditional use permit, and 2 variances. Through the major subdivision process, they have to go through 3 phases, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, including the sketch plat, preliminary plat, and final plat. Today's request is at the preliminary plat stage, so right in the middle there. Looking at the location and project area, it consists of 4 existing parcels south of Highway 5, Arboretum Boulevard, with a combined acreage of 56.4 acres. They're proposing 147 senior living units and 2 single-family lots off of Sky Drive. There are significant wetlands adjacent and on-site to the request, including 6 Mile Creek, Auburn Lake, and Kelzer's Pond. There's also significant wooded areas in the center of the site, existing homes, there are 2 of them there, and a city utility area in the northeast corner of the parcel. The sketch plat was reviewed by the Planning Commission on September 20th of last year. Comments that were taken in were regarding traffic, the building height and massing of the building, and the project feasibility, and that was reviewed by the City Council last October. Here we have a couple architectural renderings of the proposed project. So the image in the top left of the screen would be the building entrance as seen from the parking lot. And then the other 2 are aerial images of what the site would look like, including some proposed landscaping. Here's a site plan showing the 2 proposed parcels as well as the Amira project from overhead, including as well some amenities like their pool and then a pathway, which I believe will be a private boardwalk that will lead to a future extension of the Lake Minnetonka Regional Trail. So one of the requests tonight is the preliminary plat. You can see here that they are proposing up at the top of the screen in the first bold area, that would be the area consisting of the Amira project and the 2 single-family homes, and the rest of the areas would be platted as outlots for wetlands or trail dedication. So looking at land use review, as I mentioned, they're proposing 147 senior living facilities, as well as the 2 single-family homes. Their requests include a conditional use permit for multifamily use in the Central Business District and multifamily residential use in the Shoreland Overlay District. Looking at the 2040 comprehensive plan, The area is guided for a blend of uses, including high-density residential, downtown mixed use, open space, and park areas. The allowed density ranges for the downtown mixed use are 24 to 75 units per acre, and the high density allows for 12 to 36 units per acre. Amendments through the Metropolitan Council have to get council approval first. So if you were to authorize a submittal for the comprehensive plan amendment tonight, it would still have to be approved by the Metropolitan Council. So on the left, you can see what is existing, and then on the right is what's proposed with the 2 low-density lots for the single-family homes, the right-of-way for the proposed cul-de-sac, the downtown mixed-use area for the Amira project, and then the park and open space areas. Looking at design review for the structure and bulk regulations, including the height and impervious surface, as well as the building materials and design, looking at the architectural details, the building facades, and then the building materials and color as well. So looking at the height varies from 43 feet to 50 feet at its tallest point. And then the impervious proposal is 64.2%, which is well under the 80% maximum requirement for the subject property. And then adaptation of architectural details, meaning that they have to have design precedent in mind. And then the entry design, as I mentioned earlier, has to have some design features to reinforce visibility. Up at the top of the screen there, we have some exterior finishes. The building material must be at least 70% of these primary materials. The proposal seems to meet this request. And then the ground level design windows must be 50% of the front length and 30% of the area at the ground level. And in the image shown, both of these requirements are being met along the building frontage highlighted in that orange line. A few more images of what the building will look like when it's complete. Then looking at site plan review for parking, pedestrian connections and streetscaping, landscaping and tree preservation, and signage. So starting with the parking, they are proposing 150 enclosed spaces and 104 surface spaces. That approximates to about 1.73 spaces per dwelling. The requirement for the central business district is 1.5 spaces per dwelling. So the minimum requirement would be 220 stalls for the CBD district, and then also for senior housing, the use is 1.2 spaces per dwelling, so they're exceeding that standard as well. And then as part of the request, they are also including 3 electric vehicle charging stations. Looking at pedestrian connections, they have a sidewalk connection and crossing from the cul-de-sac along Sky Drive. They're also including parking lot lighting for visibility. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they will have a private boardwalk trail connection to the Lake Minnetonka Regional Trail to the south. For parkland dedication, 2.94 acres are required by city code. They are providing nearly 7 acres, which would be used for the future extension of the trail. The city would be responsible for clearing and paving at that time. Looking at tree preservation, they're proposing to remove 53 of the 80 significant trees on site, meaning they're saving just over 33% of them. And then they would be providing 317 inches in replacement trees, which equates to about 106 3-inch diameter trees. They are also providing 128 overall tree plantings, including boulevard plantings every 35 feet along the northern edge along Highway 5, and then also including foundation plantings around the sidewalks and the edge of the building, as you can see in the image. Looking at their signage, they've only proposed 1 monument sign, which would be 24 square feet per side, which is the maximum that the Central Business District allows for monument signs. So looking at the planned unit development process, it's used to allow innovative, creative, and flexible development that is sensitive to environmental, cultural, and economic considerations in partnership with public values as outlined in the comprehensive plan. This process includes input at the sketch plat level, which has already gone through, and then the details are approved during preliminary plat, and then the ordinance would be adopted at the final plat stage. Their proposed PUD deviations include a deviation for the building height. The requirement in code is 35 feet for city park and non-city park facilities in the central business district, and for residential buildings in the shoreland overlay to be a maximum of 35 feet. This deviation would allow the building height to be just over 50 feet, I believe at 50 feet and 4 inches at its tallest point. And then for the building frontage, buildings in the CBD are required to have 65% minimum building frontage along the right-of-way to pull the building closer to the road. As seen on the site plans, you can see the building is set back fairly far away from Highway 5. So the deviation would be to allow the building to be placed further away from Highway 5 with 0 road frontage. For the shoreland overlay requests, as I mentioned, they have the conditional use permit request for the RSPUD. And then the variance requests include density. So as proposed, the project would only be allowed just over 30 units per acre. What they're looking at here, they would only be allowed just over 30 units for the entire site. And what they're looking at here is 147 units plus those 2 single-family homes. So they're asking for the variance to density, and then they're also looking at a subdivision variance to the wetland buffer. This would allow easement over rear yards for the single-family parcels instead of those areas being platted as outlot, which is a requirement in city code. So as you can see, this is the project site. You can see some of the elevations as well as the proximity to some natural water bodies in the area. And then this is just showing how far into the shoreland overlay district the project site is. So their density variance that they're requesting, as I mentioned, allows approximately 34 units for the entire site. They have 147 that they're requesting, so the proposed variance would be to allow that density increase. This has already been brought forward to the Minnesota DNR, and they did not have any comments. They seem generally supportive of the request because it's in our downtown district, which intends for higher density. Then looking at the wetland buffer, low section of code here, no lot shall contain any land that is delineated wetland or a required wetland buffer, and that the city council may grant a waiver with support from the planning commission. So the variance is requested to plat the areas with the red lines to be platted as easement instead of outlot, which would allow the rear property line to be pulled back further into the wetland, but that easement would still not allow any type of impervious surface project like a shed or a patio or a deck or any sort of project like that. Now looking to the city engineer's review, I will pass it over to Kara.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. I've got a couple of slides that I can't see where I'm pointing. Are we backwards still? Okay, so a couple areas I'm going to touch on. First, access. That was talked about quite a bit during the sketch plat phase, but it was a spell ago, so I'm going to cover a little bit of detail in that regard. But the proposed access to the site is provided via Sky Drive. This is consistent with both the 2005 and 2006 approvals of the Lake Bridge development. So taking a little step back in time of history, prior to the Lake Bridge project, the part of the city wasn't annexed into the city yet. So as we were undertaking annexation south of Highway 5 in our western growth area, The city spent considerable time with MnDOT figuring out what would be appropriate access locations to Highway 5 in our western growth area. The north side of 5, with the exception of the Auburn neighborhood in this area, is all Carver Park Reserve. So it really was what the comprehensive plans are for the development on the south side that was driving that conversation. So at the time, Lakes Parkway was envisioned as a collector located across from the Auburn neighborhood, so the intersections line up. And then a second access was permitted for the Lake Bridge neighborhood. As part of that, the 2 existing access points for the Maple and Cry area that was in the township before the development occurred had to be removed. So we had to go through a process of providing access to those existing houses as part of the development. The parcel that we're talking about tonight was also envisioned for development consistent with what is proposed on the site today. And the developer was required by the city to construct SkyDrive to serve that development. But the reason I'm showing this map here is to just highlight the broader area. So the city's western growth area, when these parcels develop, will continue to be provided access by Lakes Parkway. So eventually Lakes Parkway will work its way through these undeveloped parcels over to Lake Town Road. And our next access point out to Highway 5 that is envisioned is to the west here. So once this, if and when this 155-acre parcel develops, that will be primarily served by Lakes Parkway. So just a little refresher on collector roads in the city. When we have an envisioned collector such as this, we approve those roads such that they don't have any driveways on them, so they are intended to carry significantly more traffic than what we see on a local residential street with houses on both sides. The other example of this road would be, this type of road would be Red Fox Drive in the area of Victoria Elementary, as well as Creekside Lane that's being constructed in the city's South Growth area. So what's being proposed here tonight is consistent with what was previously approved and planned for in the city, and is consistent with MnDOT's access spacing guidelines as well as the city's comprehensive plan. So this is just a blow up of the site and just depicts that SkyDrive was constructed to the property line to serve this property when it developed. So it's for all of these reasons and the 55-mile-an-hour roadway conditions on Highway 5 that MnDOT would not approve access to this site. That had been the request at the sketch plan phase, and MnDOT has continued the position that access should be provided by SkyDrive, not from Highway 5. As part of the feedback from the sketch plat, the developer was requested to complete a traffic study. So that traffic study is included in your council packet, but I did just want to show here on the slide some of the conditions and summary and conclusions that were developed in the traffic study. So generally, essentially, they took a look at the intersection of Lakes Parkway and Highway 5 to determine if this added traffic would create any new safety challenges at the intersection. And their conclusions were that there will be acceptable operations at the intersection with minimal impacts from this proposed development. So the proposed project will generate 29 trips during the morning traffic peak and 37 during the evening peak, and essentially concluded that that intersection is built to handle that level of traffic increase. And we certainly, myself personally, wasn't surprised by that result because we constructed the intersection back with Lake Bridge, knowing that eventually all those parcels to the west, once they develop, they'll flow through this intersection. Now, there may be an opportunity somewhere down the road for additional traffic control at that intersection, whether it be signalized or perhaps a roundabout, but traffic would need to be significantly higher on Lakes Parkway than it is today. For a kind of relevant comparison in your mind, those of you who have been around a while know that the residents in the Minnewaska Parkway neighborhood have been vying for traffic control increases at their intersection, and it wasn't until recently that they were able to get a light, and the only reason for that is the reroute of the Arboretum's entrance to that location will drive the traffic up. So the city doesn't have control over that. It's a process that MnDOT evaluates intersections for their roads for making that determination.
Sure, I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
It's fair to say, though, that the traffic that would flow through Minnewaska Parkway is primarily Chanhassen traffic. And there's significantly more homes in that area than there are in the Lake Town area? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, the existing traffic on Minnewaska Parkway is a lot higher than what is currently on Lakes Parkway or going to be increased to on Lakes Parkway with this development.
Thank you.
Just a couple of other items that are under my purview for review. I also take a look at grading, stormwater management, and utilities on the site relative to the city's standards for infrastructure. What I want to note first here, and I'm going to go in reverse order in my head, but the sanitary sewer for this property will be served by a connection to an existing trunk sewer line that we have running adjacent to Highway 5. That sewer line will be private. They also will be connecting to the trunk water main that's also located adjacent to Highway 5. That water line will be required to be looped through the site and placed in a drainage and utility easement because the city will be responsible for maintenance of that loop. So when we have our water system looped and have hydrants on it, the city wants to be responsible for the maintenance and operation because it is connected to your full water system. In this particular instance, stormwater management is being provided by the developer through the construction of a filtration basin as well as an underground stormwater management facility. For these types of projects, different than our residential neighborhoods, this stormwater management infrastructure would be privately maintained by the landowner. Minnehaha Creek Watershed District does require a maintenance agreement with the landowner to ensure that those facilities get maintained over time. But for these types of projects that are serving just a particular parcel, those are privately maintained.
You said private wastewater?
Stormwater.
Stormwater and private sewer.
Correct, yes.
And that's not unusual.
No, that would be typical. So the sanitary sewer is essentially a service from their apartment building to the main that they'll maintain, like you would your own service from your home to your house.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Proposed grading, there were some questions at the Planning Commission meeting relating to the existing berm along Highway 5. We were able to confirm that when you're driving along Highway 5 and you see the berm that's there, that part of the berm that you see from Highway 5 is not being modified with the proposed improvements, and I think the developer will highlight that perhaps a bit more in their presentation. And I think that's my last slide. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So as well as planning and engineering review, a couple others that reviewed this application were the fire chief, the public works department, and the building department. And then externally, as I mentioned, the Minnesota DNR has reviewed it, as well as the Minnesota Department of Transportation and the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. So at the Planning Commission meeting on July 18th, they held a public hearing and recommended approval of all project components with a unanimous vote. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the applications that were noticed were preliminary plat, CPA, PUD, CUP, and variances. So staff's recommendation tonight is approval of all project components as the Planning Commission recommended, as well with the conditions listed here that were included with your council packet and are also in the approving resolution. So with that, we would need two separate motions tonight. The first one being to adopt the resolution for the preliminary plat, PUD, CUP, and variance requests. And then the second resolution would be authorizing a comprehensive plan amendment to go to the Metropolitan Council. With that, staff's presentation is done, but I believe we have an additional presentation from the developer.
Perfect. Hi, welcome. Come on up to the podium and state your name for the record, please.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Dave Young, and I'm with United Properties. Thank you for listening to our presentation this evening. Are you controlling this, Brian, or?
I'm not sure. Give it a try. Let's see what happens.
Well, nope.
Nope.
Well, we can start off, so apologize for that. Again, thank you once again. So United Properties has been in business for over 100 years, managing and developing real estate assets across Minnesota, for that matter. Since 2004, our Amira, or our senior housing brand, has been developing residential homes of all types for our senior citizens, predominantly across three distinct housing offerings. One of them is the Applewood Point. That is a for-sale cooperative model. Another is the Amira 55-plus active adult community. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. And lastly, Amira Choice is our care community. That's your traditional assisted living, memory care, independent living, congregate type housing. But specifically here tonight, we're here to talk about the Amira 55-plus active adult independent rental model. The next slide for me, please. So I just wanted to take an opportunity and just share a couple of photos here of a couple of our existing communities. So in the last several years, United Properties and Amira have developed three existing 55-plus active adult communities. These are pictures of two of them. We have one in Roseville, we have one in Bloomington, and one recently opened in Minnetonka. They are well-appointed, many amenities that our seniors look for in their housing choices. Interior amenities and exterior amenities, as you see in these photos here. Jump to the next slide. But really talking more about the people, right, than the construction and the amenities. It's about the people that we serve in these communities. So these residents, they're really seeking the social atmosphere. They're seeking to be part of a home made up of their peers. And you know, although many of them are snowbirds, many of them stay in town and enjoy their peers. You know, they can get together for card games and breakfast coffees and happy hours, all without going outside, you know, in the winter months. So we're excited to provide that opportunity for them. Our homes inside the building are well appointed, very similar to what you'd find in many of new construction, you know, with upscale finishes, the quartz countertops, you know, vinyl wood plank floorings, stainless steel countertops, and wide open floor plans. It's really what the market is desiring, you know, leaving maybe a larger home with acreage and shores to come into maybe a smaller setting, but a bigger building amongst their peers. Exterior rendering, just maybe a blow up of what Planner McCann showed you earlier with the exterior front entry. Couple of pictures of the interiors. Again, just want to point out how well appointed they are. Very high-end finishes, big open common areas, amenity spaces that the residents can enjoy and congregate and socialize. A little bit of site context for you. The site is obviously set back just south of Highway 5 there. The numbers may be a little hard for you to see on your screen, but you know, the closest neighboring to the west is over 600 feet, and to the south is over 850 feet. The aerial perspectives, which Planner McCann showed you in his slides as well, I won't necessarily get into that, although we did want to just highlight just a touch on the existing berm or perceived berm that you see from Highway 5. Yeah, the majority of that is on MnDOT right-of-way property. So it does go down to a swale and then it slopes back up. and we are not modifying that at all. There's only a small portion of that that's actually on the Emira parcel. To speak to the demand and the demographics that really support this type of housing, you know, the U.S. Census Bureau, as you see on the left-hand side there, illustrates here what's happening with the growth of our senior population, and you can just read through those numbers if you will. I think a lot of this has probably been heard before, just the increasing growth in that market segment. And then on the right here is a demand summary of that we conducted, or Maxfield conducted on our behalf for the primary market area, which consists of 3 to 5 miles from the site. And as you can see there, the demand, excess demand that is anticipated is just under 900 units for this product type. And then, you know, units capturable by the site, the 147, we just kind of backed into that number. We only need to capture 20% of the excess demand as of last year to support this project. Another graph, just a visual aid. This is of the 7-county metro area of just the rapid growth acceleration of our senior population that the Twin Cities is anticipating happening. Some of the benefits of community housing, you know, again, serving the long-term residents of the community. Most, not all, but many of our residents of our communities come from within that 3 to 5 mile range, right? They're just looking for an opportunity to leave that existing acreage site or big 2-story home with stairs, or trucking down to the basement to do laundry or whatever it may be. But many do come from outside the community, maybe because their friends or their grandchildren live within the community and they're willing to relocate to the community to be closer. Obviously, those that are leaving their existing home, that's an opportunity for housing turnover. You know, and, many of those bring in younger families. Those younger families tend to put investment into that existing housing stock, support the school systems, and increase tax base in those means. And then independent and active seniors, really the ones that want to be here. They want to frequent, you know, the downtown and all that downtown offers, and the retail and the restaurants and the shops. You know, that's why they want to stay here, and they're excited to be able to do that all year long. So with that being said, we appreciate your consideration for our project this evening. Myself and our design team is here to answer any questions you may have.
Terrific, thank you.
You're
I do
welcome.
have a question for you,
Yes.
so why don't you go ahead and stay there, Mr. Young. The back of that property has the trail, and you guys have allotted a portion of that to complete that trail. And I trust that there will be an access point from your building to that trail that's private, but the trail itself is public. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam
Okay.
Mayor. Yes.
Terrific, because we want all those folks to ride their bikes down to our
And
downtown.
As do we. We're excited for that to take place
All right.
someday.
Council, other questions? Yeah, Councilmember Roberts, please.
So as someone who has learned more about senior housing in the last couple of years from moving his grandparents into some in the area, so I do have a few questions. So first of all, I mean, I'm all in support of more senior housing, right? Like as you showed, we need more senior housing, and my hope is, you know, with more of these housing, right, like it's more readily available because it's hard to find for those seniors, and then 2, hopefully the prices steady out and it becomes a little bit more affordable. I know we're not going to get there right away, but just a couple questions. I know this is the you know, just the 55 plus unit. I guess how do you determine if the community is right for the memory care, and you know, because obviously that's a need too, right? I think it was the Choice you called it.
Emira Choice,
Yep,
that's correct.
product. How do you go ahead and determine? I guess if you know which property or what you're gonna do. Like, you needed more land maybe to do this, or how do you determine that?
No, I think that we rely really on our market studies that we conduct, and find out where the growth is taking place. You know, generally, in an ideal world, we would probably lead with the Emira and then follow up some years later and have a complementary product as a transitionary product to an Emira Choice. You know, it's just kind of a natural state of progression. That's not to say that, you know, we're not currently looking right now, but eventually in this market will support that, and we'd be thrilled and excited to have an opportunity to build an Emira Choice adjacent or somewhere close to our Emira building.
What type of, I saw obviously you have a pool, but what type of amenities do you have? Does it have dining facility inside? Like what kind of amenities are
Sure.
there?
So generally speaking, our Emira communities have a great room with a full kitchen. It's not a commercial kitchen. It's just a residential kitchen for the residents' use. It's more of a gathering space for large social groups. We will have a club room, more of a smaller, more intimate gathering area, maybe the size of this room. You know, TV, fireplace, pool table, game room, you know, type activities. Generally speaking, a woodworking shop located in the garage. We have obviously the pool, a fitness room, a yoga studio. Boy, I think, Kelsey, I'm missing some, a library, thank you. Generally a smaller library where the residents donate books, and it's kind of a come and go. And then a craft room, right? So you have the woodworking shop, and you have a craft room more for the softer textiles within the building.
Do you typically allow pets or?
Yes, yep, pets are allowed.
A couple other just questions. So you obviously parking is nice, right? Like we've talked about parking a lot here, but you know, obviously if this was in a spot right in the heart of downtown, right, the extra parking would be great. It seems that you're a little overparked. I tend to see, right, like the senior facilities having a lot of empty parking lots. I guess is there any consideration of maybe making that a little bit smaller and trying to keep a little bit more of the natural environment, you know, or to just so it's not just one big paved parking lot that isn't going to be filled up, probably more than likely.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's usually contrary to what we're trying to achieve when it comes to parking. Yeah, you know, historically speaking, when our buildings open, there's that ratio of the 1.7 is usually a target number for us, knowing the demographic that we are going after. You know, to your point, Councilmember Roberts, I guess I would not be opposed to looking at dedicating some of that for proof of parking, right? And have it there, have the real estate there, have the utilities and whatnot underground, so that we could maybe just expand a portion of that parking lot if the demand warrants, to keep it more green, if that would be considered. And maybe that could be brought forth in the final plat consideration. I guess I should look to.
Okay. I think that's all I have for right now.
Okay, good. Councilmember Evansky, do you have anything?
I have actually a couple of questions. In the before picture of where the parcels are of this, there's a triangular piece that lives down in the lower left above what looks like a section of the trail. Is that gonna be deeded over and become more outlot that joins with the rest of the outlots that surround the city properties there?
That is correct. Is that, yeah, that is
okay,
correct.
and then is there an actual connection that goes all the way down to what looks like the LRT parcel that's currently owned as part of the overall parcel? So this is this rectangular portion that has a slight bend upwards, or as the mayor said, that borders the other subdivision, right? So are you going to bring your trail all the way down and connect that into that parcel?
That is our intent, yes. The private trail connection from our building itself across the creek, and then connect to the
And to
regional trail.
connect to that parcel, right? And then
Correct.
that parcel then is going to be deeded like an outlot, so to speak, or a trail.
Correct.
Okay.
Open
and then,
space, I believe it's.
right, and then is that trail going to be like maybe a crushed paved trail that brings it all the way down to the southwest portion of the trail?
I would probably defer to staff as to what the regional trail would look like.
Mayor and Councilmember Ivansky, that will be determined at the time that we're looking to actually do the expansion. Right now, this trail dedication area is just a significant step towards moving towards that future expansion, but I don't believe we have any planned paving at this time.
Okay, well, could we have that be bedded and crushed and pre-paved as part of the development of this? I'm thinking about the residents that are going to live here, that they might want to have a sort of circuitous loop, and from my standpoint, it's clockwise, but it's counterclockwise, so that they could come out of the building, walk down, and then connect to the trail, walk the trail, and then get into the outlots that then connect back to the existing subdivision, and then up through that, and then back in, so that they have a good long walking loop that they can be fully contiguous away from traffic, except for where it's going to be in subdivision. Is that possible with this design? And if it isn't, what can we do to get there?
Our design does have a paved or a concrete walkway around the entire building, through the parking lot, up and around Lake Drive, and then, Sky Drive, and then back down. It's that connection going south off of the amenity deck that you see there. That connection to the regional trail would take place whenever the regional trail is ready for improvements to be made. And I think there are some future steps that the city needs to take to further expanding that regional trail improvement, if I'm not mistaken.
So that goes
the land, right? So
if I can. I've got-
Yeah, Councilmember Gunderson, sorry.
Are we creating a trail gap then? Another one? Does it become a trail gap?
Precisely. I mean, that was my point, Councilmember Graham.
So,
We're building a trail gap. Can we not build a trail
Yes,
gap
my-
at the time we're developing?
All right, Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Gunderson, members of the council. The trail gap exists today. It is already on our radar. So you're not creating an additional trail gap. So should the council want to explore the cost to do what Councilmember Ivansky is suggesting, whether it's a paved or some sort of crushed partial trail, council, you could direct us to bring back that information for your budget discussions later this fall when we're looking at our trail gap. There are some funds in your trail gap fund, but we would have to do some work on our end to determine what those options would be to construct a partial or a portion of that trail, the pros and cons to that, and then bring that information back. If that's something you want us to do, we can certainly do that, but you would need to track that work.
my understanding from the planning commission meeting is that there's already a dirt trail there that is regularly sounds like being used by residents of the existing. Is this, that from what we've heard, I know that what we are hearing?
Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Roberts, members of the council. I'm going to kind of look over here. I'm going to try to attempt to answer it. If it's technically incorrect, I'll have them just cut me off and jump in. But if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, yep, so we do already have that, and this is what you're referring to, Councilmember Roberts. So that portion that where the cursor was just on is something that the city already has. And that is what is currently being used. So what we would be looking at is to go from where the cursor is right now on your screen through the parcel of what's going to be dedicated to us through this process. That would be that cost that we would bring back. So you would make progress on your existing trail gap, but you wouldn't be able to make that connection all the way until the parcels to the east would, or not the parcels, but the rest of the trail easement could be negotiated from other private property owners. I'm going to look over here to see if I messed that up or if you guys want to add anything else.
If I may, I'll just jump in and say that is correct. There's 3 or 4 parcels to the east that the city doesn't own or have ownership rights over. Brian and I did do a site visit, and there is some evidence that persons and perhaps deer are traveling through that wooded area much like you might see through the woods, but that's not land that the city currently owns, so it's not something that we've maintained or created.
So this gap has been identified. We take one step closer by getting the land dedicated to us on a large portion of that gap.
Correct, at no cost.
But we will need to figure out how to,
And I'm assuming part of what you'd bring back if we asked you to would be also an evaluation of, because we've learned from other projects that the larger it is, usually the better cost savings we have, right? So does it make sense to do a small section of it currently versus waiting and doing it once we have the land that we need to do it in one shot?
yes, to all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right.
Okay, and my questions are not the 3 parcels that live to the east of the section line. Is there an ability to have the trail where the Amira project connects to bring that trail and develop that all the way down to the end of the parcel? And then we can talk about how do we connect the Lake Bridge area to that? And that was so that there would be a sizable loop that residents here can enjoy that in addition to the loop that's on their own private property. And then that puts us in a space where there's less of a gap there.
So Councilmember Avansky, I do just want to clarify that it does get confusing here because we're talking about the same area and 2 different conditions, but from this point on my cursor, this is where that super steep sort of switchback deal connects the Lake Bridge neighborhood up to the Watermark neighborhood. From here to the west is already a gravel trail that the Lake Bridge folks use to connect to the Watermark neighborhood. So I just want to make that clear to the public that that is also part of the area that is getting deeded to the city as part of this project.
Right, and I guess where I'm coming from is we're gonna, what are the prospects of doing the development work while this project is being done and have this project cover that development for the residents that'll be living there to connect into those parcels that would bring them into the Lake Bridge neighborhood.
Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Vansky, members of the council. We are certainly happy to do that, but that would be work that you would need to direct city staff to look into.
All right. Council, are we interested in having city staff take a look at what that might, how that would pencil out?
Yeah, I guess I had a question along the lines of, if we're not ready to do that, who retains the land? Is the land the city's then? And we don't have to worry, I mean, like, at the rate we're filling our gaps, we're all gonna be dead in this room. So I don't, in 100 years, when we're ready to fill that gap, will we have the land to do it? Or because it's no longer owned by the ownership group, now nobody knows who actually owns the land? Are we getting into that, or this is now city land that we're getting to fill the gap, no matter when we're ready to fill it? Correct. Okay. It's a moot point, we're all dead anyway, so.
Right, and then I
Let's
have
be
some other
optimistic.
questions.
We could probably get something done.
The lot that is going to be created in this for the second single-family home, and I think we have one of the relatives in the audience that is next to that. The roundabout or the cul-de-sac that's there, I mean, that feels a bit disjointed in the whole scheme of how this lays out, and it feels as though that cul-de-sac is actually pushing the whatever building goes there setback such that I think we should be concerned as to whether or not there will be enough room on the back of that house should a patio or a deck or a screen porch be put on there that may not get done because there's a possibility that it would encroach into the buffer easement, and we wouldn't do that, and then we'd have a problem in the future. So is it possible to reroute this road that perhaps you shrink that down at least and perhaps maybe create almost a boulevard or parkway effect where there's an island that separates two pieces of the road to slow traffic down and, you know, sort of create this island approach as you're coming into it with trees and buffers like that, that could then also address the question of berming that we've heard from Planning Commission and other members of the public on their public comment.
Okay, so my thoughts are kind of going down that same route. And so my question here is probably a procedural one at this point. So I want to talk about that single-family home. Is this the appropriate time to do that? Because we are providing a variance this evening for that, correct?
Correct. Now would be the time to talk about it.
Okay, so I do want to talk about that a little bit. Now, I don't have any issues with the home at all, but I do take issue with the fact that we're doing a couple of things here that are kind of out of the ordinary. We've got an outlot that we're going to turn into help me out with this, Mr. McCann, an outlot that we're going to turn into
Easement.
an easement so that the house can sit right on the back side, but there cannot be, to Councilmember Evansky's point, this house could never, because of the Shoreland Overlay District, could never have a patio, a fire pit, a deck, a shed. I mean, that in effect, that ends with the wall. You can't have anything more beyond that.
Mayor and council members, essentially that is correct. As you can see, as I've got up on the screen here, the proposed buffer that they have is the red lines. So you can see kind of this thin line where it ends. This would essentially be the rear property line for the two single-family parcels that they're proposing. So,
Can you show that on with the cursor?
oh yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
My screen versus that one. Sorry about that. So here's the line that I'm talking about where those red lines end. Everything north of that would be non-easement area. That would be an area where a structure could go, a deck, a patio, a fire pit, if it's meeting all the other applicable regulations, of course. But that's where the easement would begin, or if that outlot were required in this instance, that's where that outlot line would go to.
So what I just said is accurate.
Correct.
No deck, no patio, no fire pit, no shed.
Up until that.
Well, up until the red.
Yeah, I guess I'd like
Mr. Young, please.
just to clarify that the box you see where it says Lot 2, Block 1.
Yep.
That is intended to be a building pad. And then there's generally room around the building pad for a traditional deck or a patio or a shed of some sort, and then the buffer starts beyond that. I don't know that we have dimensions. We may have dimensions on our actual full-size submittal, but there's definitely some room there between the.
How much room? Sorry.
I don't have it. I apologize. I don't have that on me. We
So,
submitted that on the
I mean,
plans.
if the people who are building this understand that that's a problem, that's great, and they don't care. My thought is always, what happens with the next homeowner? How do we ensure that those restrictions carry forward, to the next property owner and the property owner after that? So I guess maybe that's my question, is how do we, even though the first home builder is going to be fine with it because they know the restriction, how do we know that the second homeowner needs to know that as well? Is there a way to?
I think, not to talk over you, Mayor, but I think we're putting the cart before the horse, that there's a bigger problem here than that's the second owner in this particular situation. We're allowing a developer to build on an outlot that we've not done before. That's my bigger problem. That's the slippery slope that we're gonna set precedent for moving forward. That's the bigger thing. So we've not allowed developers to build on outlots before. So let's address that one first. Is that a slope we're willing to go down moving forward in the future?
Which is why we're going to grant a variance
Right.
to change it to an easement.
Right,
Which
but
allows
that's,
the building.
again,
Right, just to be clear, customarily, there would be an outlot built here. and then that outlot would stay owned by the city. And what I think the ask is to dispense with the concept of the outlot, which is normally a requirement, and instead simply grant or have an easement on these lots granted as the wetland buffer in lieu of the outlot. And I do understand where you're coming from, that is
gonna be
not
asked
what we
for that.
typically do. I think we need to be diligent and say that, there's the uniqueness about this project, which, I'm going to be clear, I saw this first when I'm planning commission. I liked it then, I like it now, I want to make it work, but I want to think about the future too, because in those same roles, and council here has seen a fair number of times where these things come back later because somebody didn't catch everything when it was in this phase, and we'd like to put our experience in to benefit here to think this through. So if this roundabout or this cul-de-sac is stripped away, then the building lot line, the setback from the street, can move that building pad further north and provide a space in the back so that we don't have to deal with these issues going forward and have encroachments, especially now, and ask for encroachment into now a wetland, what would be a wetland buffer easement.
I think though the cul-de-sac is there because it's for snow removal and for the fire truck that's what the chief has asked for, because they need to turn around. So I think that's the issue there, is they need the cul-de-sac for snow removal and the fire truck.
I mean, can we solve this with a better approach? Where
That's not, I mean, we don't plan things, I'm looking at the plan that we have in front of us. And I can tell you that the first time somebody said, deviated from what we talk about all the time in side yard setbacks being 10 feet, we've gone down to now, this is where this stuff starts, right here, this kind of project. There's always one, and then there's another that had uniqueness to it, and we talked about it, and then it snowballs into another one, and all of a sudden, we've got 2 or 3 developments without outlots. And what kind of problem does that cause in the future?
Well,
So
I think,
where are we at?
I think
And does the Myra project succeed without these lots? Do you succeed with these lots, with this?
right, there's a home already there.
So without that home.
Lot 3 is an existing home, and the family member is intending to move on to Lot 2 and build a home next door.
But if it's an outlot, does the 55-plus building succeed?
Well, I believe it, I'll let Planner McCon could add, the wetland buffer exists regardless. That shaded area exists. So whether there's a home there or not, I think the intent of the ask of the variance is if it's an outlot, then there's a setback criteria to the rear yard. If it's an outlot, by keeping it an easement, you can maintain the setback regardless. Even today, if I'm not mistaken, again, no structures are allowed to be built within the wetland buffer today.
Right.
We're not changing the wetland buffer. I think we're changing the classification of the buffer just to be able to maintain the rear yard setback.
And to your point about the concern about slippery slope, I think the variance creates the opportunity to be reviewed. I mean, we review every variance that comes in front of us, and and they all have unique and special circumstances. And so, which is why it's a variance. I think my concern is how do we document this for the future that says, this is what it is, and know what you're buying. I guess it's more of a disclosure for the future.
Well, I mean, if they wanted to put on a bigger deck or something, right? Like something that went into that area, I mean, they'd have to get a permit, right? So our building inspector, right? Like I tried building a deck earlier this year and I couldn't go certain, right? Like, I mean.
So, yeah, that's my question, and maybe, I don't know, Mr. McCann, Kara, Ms. Hardy?
The easement would run with the land and show up on any Alta survey that would be requested of a home buyer or a builder or a permit, right? I mean, I think every building permit, you need to submit a survey to some extent. So it would it would be documented that way.
Mayor, I'm playing a little bit of catch-up here on this issue, and so I wonder if I could just have staff reiterate what exactly, because I'm now understanding a little bit more about the variance. What the variance request here, let me say what I think it is, and then you correct me. Your report sort of indicates that it could have been done either of two ways. Either the wetland area could have been reflected as an outlot, in which case there would have been a setback variance needed from the rear yard created by the outlot. The outlot would be a new property line, create a new property boundary, and thus the single-family home lots would need a setback variance from the rear yard. That isn't the approach being proposed, though. That's not what's reflected on the preliminary plat, as I understand it. There is no outlot shown there. Instead, the variance is to allow the wetland area to not be reflected as an outlot and instead be reflected as an easement. And so that's essentially what the variance is granting. Do I have all that right? Is that what's going on?
Yes, that's all correct.
Okay, thank you. So the way that would be memorialized then, council, is that as a condition of the approvals, the series of approvals that you're granting here tonight, if you were to proceed with granting all of them, an easement instrument would have to be recorded, and that would be part of your approval here tonight would mandate that. You would be approving a variance that mandates the recording of an easement over the wetland area, and that easement instrument would be of record and would reflect that.
Okay. Mayor? If I might add too, so this is a requirement of Minnehaha Creek Watershed District that a buffer be provided adjacent to the wetland. As part of their requirements, they do require buffer monument signs to be placed on the property that shows where that buffer line is. So as property turns over, it's known, assuming nobody goes and takes out the sign. The City of Victoria typically requires these buffers to be included in outlot to achieve a greater level of protection for the resource. So when it's on, these get encroached all the time. When it's on a city outlot, it's a little bit easier for us to enforce, hey, that's off your property. In this case, we would have two lots with these particular easements. So to your point, it's a variance request. It's not something that staff has brought forward to the city before, because typically, to the city council before, because typically we're dealing with a large lot residential subdivision with a lot of options. But in this particular case, there's an existing home that already exists on the property that is just a reality of the parcel that's being platted. So certainly that existing lot really would have to have a variance either to the setback or to the wetland buffer rule. So, you know, it's the second lot that's being created that's certainly unique from any other circumstance that I've been involved in here, so.
And there's not going to be any other single-family homes on this property, so this is kind of the
So the other
unicorn of it.
issue with these lots that I'm seeing is, so in the packet, it says the single-family homes are satisfying the density requirement because of the exclusion of the easement areas. Is that typically common? My understanding is that's not typically common, so that if we were including that easement area, they would not meet density requirements for the two homes. I know there's two different density requirements, right? There's the city and there's the shoreland or whatever. I understand the shoreland one is like, right, like that's, no one would meet that requirement, and so that's kind of like this is meeting our CBD stuff, right? So, but for the city, right, like if we weren't excluding the easement areas, they would not meet the density requirements for us. And I guess, why are we doing that, I guess, right? Like, it doesn't seem like that's a typical thing that we typically do.
Sure. Mayor and council members, that is correct. So that area, it's still being counted as not buildable. It's easement. It's not your standard easement. So that's why it's being included in those calculations. When we're looking at other subdivisions, we're not including those standard 5-foot side, 10-foot rear setbacks or easements. In this case, it's a little bit different because it would typically be required for an outlot, but it's still easement area that we could consider as unbuildable.
Thank you so much for your patience with this. This is complicated. It's complicated stuff. All right. Council, other questions, comments?
I just don't see
Councilmember Gunderson.
why we would make this exception on the variance, as we would. I don't understand what is more special about this particular one than there is any one in the future. And the slippery slope is there. And it's not, I don't think at this point it's one I'm willing to walk down for future development.
So if
Member Roberts.
if we're doing it, right, because we have the existing house that's there and we're talking about then the new lot, right, where a new house will be put. I mean, what we're talking about would be across both, right? So if we said the issue is the new lot, I guess how would that look? Could we say like you can't do the new lot that you want to build the new house on? But I guess how would that work? Because we like the apartment complex, right? And obviously that current house is there. How does that work, I guess, with the spot they want to put the new house?
Mayor and council members, that's a good question. I might look to the city attorney on this one about the applicability of a variance to one of these lots and not the other. Do you have anything to add, any clarifying points on that? Is that something that could be allowed, or would the variance have to be applied to both lots?
Well, Mayor and Council, I guess, as I understand the staff report and the preliminary plat, it's intended that the staff is bringing forward a recommendation from Planning Commission and staff to treat the variance as though it is being granted to allow the wetland buffer to be an easement rather than an outlot, and that approach is intended to apply to both lots, right? It would be an easement over the rear of the two lots. So as I understand the variance that's coming forward, it's a variance that's meant to apply to both lots. Whether that's the best approach or what the council wants to do, obviously, I don't know. But that appears to me to be what's coming forward from planning.
But I guess then my question would be, do we have the ability to change that and say we're only putting it on one lot and the other lot is still just a outlot that cannot be built on?
Mayor and Council, I would be remiss if I didn't say I think anything is possible in a planning matter like this. But in particular, I think, yes, that is theoretically possible. The mayor has said, and I've nodded, I nodded loudly, I think, that this is a fairly complicated situation already. I mean, you've got a number of moving parts, obviously. That adds another layer of complication, but is it infeasible? No, I don't think it is. I guess, maybe you'd want to talk a little bit more about the policy objective of making it more complicated that way, but I'm not going to say it can't be done.
Could I add?
Please, step to the podium, introduce yourself.
Alex Hall with United Properties.
I'm sorry.
I work with Dave.
Say your name again, I'm sorry.
Alex Hall.
Okay, Mr. Hall, go ahead.
And Mayor, council members. The one thing I would add there, that even if it is, which it sounds like it's feasible to approve the one existing home, but not that second lot, that the complication, we could end up with a complication on our end. We've got a purchase agreement with a seller, and that purchase agreement contemplated those two lots. And so it's very possible if the second lot was not approved, it could complicate us moving forward on the Emira. I'm not saying that's the case, but that's just something worth taking into consideration, because I don't think we just have the right to move forward without fulfilling the obligations or what was contemplated in the original purchase agreement. So I thought I'd just add that.
Understood, thank you. Good. All right, council, other questions, comments? All right, seeing none, let's take a look at what we need to do. All right, we need two things out of this, right? All right, so the first, council, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to adopt the resolution approving the preliminary PUD, CUP, and variance request by United Properties for the Victoria Myra development with the conditions and findings proposed by staff. And also a second motion to adopt the resolution authorizing the submittal of a comprehensive plan amendment to the Metropolitan Council for the Myra development.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Evansky, we're going to
Mayor.
take these separately.
Mayor and council members, if I can just pull that back, if we can do one motion at a time and then the vote, and then we can get to
Please.
the second motion.
Yes, absolutely. So, based on that, we have a motion to adopt the resolution approving a preliminary plat, PUD, CUP, and variance requests. We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
We have one nay? Two.
Nay.
Okay. So Councilmember Gunderson and Councilmember Roberts, 2 nays. Do you have that recorded? Motion carries.
Mayor, can I just?
Yes,
interject?
please.
I agree with your conclusion that the motion carries, but do we agree that the motion carries? There's nothing packaged here that I see that requires a supermajority vote.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, very good.
All right. Very good. All right. I will entertain a second motion.
I'll make the second motion to adopt the resolution authorizing the submittal of a comprehensive plan amendment to the Metropolitan Council for the Myra development.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Noted nays from Councilmember Gunderson and Councilmember Roberts. Do you have that recorded? All right. Very good. Thank you so much. We are moving on. The next item on our agenda is item 6.4, which is our second quarter update on the strategic plan. Presenting this evening is Assistant City Manager Alyssa Swanson. Ms. Swanson, please. We'll give this a minute to clear.
All right, wonderful. Best for last, right?
What's that?
Best for last.
Best for last. Let's go.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the council. I'm always happy to be here presenting our strategic plan updates. Every time I come back, I always think how quickly time goes because it feels like I was just here giving the last one. But we are halfway through the year of 2023, which means we're looking at entering our quarter 3 of our strategic plan for this last year. So just a little bit of history before we delve in. I know you all are very familiar with this, but for our audience and members of the public at home that may be watching, just want to provide a little bit of background. So this is a 3-year strategic plan, which started in 2021. We're nearing the very end of it. And what the strategic plan contains is a series of 8 priorities that were set by council at the time. They can be seen on the screen. And within each of those 8 priorities is about 123 initiatives. These initiatives range on project type, cost, and just even priority status within the plan itself. And out of those 123, where we sit today is 86 of those initiatives have been completed or have been completed and are ongoing, meaning that they take additional staff resources or financial resources to keep those initiatives moving forward and keep those services being provided to our residents. So what we like to do, in addition to just that brief recap, is to give a quick spotlight update on some of the initiatives that either were completed or progress moved forward in this last quarter. I will say all 123 initiatives, their progress has been summarized in the staff report. But if you have any questions this evening related to those, please feel free to ask. We do not plan on covering those tonight. So with that, our first spotlight is under the service excellence category. And I will say this could also be considered under the recreation and culture category. This is related to our volunteer program, so it could fall under both. But the initiative we're specifically addressing is annually recognizing our city volunteers and Community Builder Awards. So within this last quarter, City Council, you recognized our many city volunteers, our Citizens Academy graduates, and our citizen committee members at our annual volunteer gathering event, which is held outside at the Charleston Thune Bandstand. This is a great way for city staff and for you, City Council, to thank and just give appreciation to all those countless hours that each one of these volunteers give back to the city to make Victoria a wonderful place. And in addition to that, what we do is we award the Community Builders Award, which the Community Builders Award is a recognition to a specific group, individual, business, organization, etc., that shares an extraordinary commitment to giving back to our community. And in this last year, we were excited to announce that the Victoria Garden Club was announced as the 2023 Community Builders Award recipient. The next spotlight, a little less flashy, but just as important, is also under the Service Excellence category, which is conducting the annual audit of the city's finance statements. This is something that you took a deep dive look at the May 8th City Council meeting with our independent external auditors, MMKR. This is, again, extremely important. It does take a significant amount of staff time as well as just resources. However, it really provides accountability to government entities related to programs and services provided, and it provides a high level of transparency on how city taxpayer dollars are spent. So it is an extremely important project, and we're happy to check this off for this year. And then as for 2022, at the end of the report, we're happy to find that there was 0 findings or concerns for the fiscal year of 2022. And then last but not least, our last spotlight is under the engagement and communications category. There's 2 initiatives that we're looking at here, which is the first, regularly providing opportunities for residents to give input and feedback, as well as increase use of what we call our request tracker to respond to public concerns. This last quarter, we centralized the request tracker function or the report a concern function on our city's website, which makes it easier for residents or the public to report concerns that are going on in our community, such as potholes, issues in parks, streetlight outages, etc. And we have seen an uptick on those concerns just based on providing a good spot for people to find and navigate towards it. You know, we're seeing a lot of tech-savvy residents joining our community as of late, so providing the ability for them to interact with their government on their cell phone or on their computer is definitely something that we're finding that residents are looking for, and we're happy to provide that service. With that, Mayor, members of City Council, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Great work to you and the team. Congratulations. You guys have worked really hard on ticking those initiatives off the list, and we appreciate that. So now I will open the floor for discussion. Council, discussion.
I'll just echo your comments, Mayor, that great work. The progress is substantial, and I think that the feedback that I've gotten from other residents on your efforts has been positive and reflects well on the city, so thanks for the effort.
Other comments?
Yeah.
Councilmember Reif, please.
Echo that as well. Great feedback from the residents, and also just specifically the residents being engaged on what's going on and hearing about it, like the garden club and being recognized, and just people being involved in these discussions is what they want. So that's great.
Great. Anything else? All right, seeing no more discussion, there are no more items on our regular agenda, so we'll move on to reports and emerging issues. Ms. Hardy, let's start with you. Anything from staff?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. During your last council meeting, you, Councilmember Gunderson, had asked about why we, for the Brookmore plat, made a change with the impervious surface from square footage to percentage. And I wanted to bring back that information, circle back to you all. So I did have an opportunity to connect with some former staff to really understand why that change was made. And this change was actually brought to us by the developer, so it was per their request. And staff did spend quite a bit of time in the planning department reviewing that, how that change might impact overall development and then the specific lots. So the rationale behind the request was that in the Brookmore development, there are several different size lots, where in most of our developments, historically, the lots have been pretty similarly sized. But there really is quite a large deviation in the size of the lots. And so by making that request go to percentage, it allowed for overall the development to actually preserve more open space than go by what we have normally done. So on some of the smaller lots, you might have more impervious surface, but on those larger lots, you're preserving more of that open space. So overall, looking at through that more comprehensive lens, it was better in terms of preservation, which is why they made that change. So just wanted to circle back and provide that information to you all. And that's it from me, but I know that our city clerk also has a brief update for you all.
Yes, Ms. Essefold, please.
Mayor and council members, I just want to point your attention to the art. It is again provided by Deb, and it is again the Synergy art, different art from last time, and it is opened for the council and the public to view during regular business hours.
Very good, thank you. And that Deb is Deb Zeller, not Deb McMillan. So just want to clarify that for people. Deb McMillan cannot trace. So there we have that. Attorney Volz, any reports with you?
I don't, Mayor, thank you.
All right, anything from council?
I guess I just was wondering
Councilmember Roberts.
if we've heard anything about the pickleball. Like, they seemed very busy this weekend, so I'm assuming that it's all good reviews, hopefully.
Ms. Swanson, I trust you have a report for us on the pickleball courts.
Absolutely, the much anticipated pickleball courts. Yes, we opened the courts last Friday at 6 a.m. and there was already a line waiting for the doors to be unlocked. So, over the weekend, even today, we've seen the courts being well used and pretty much full the entire time. So it's pretty exciting. The public's definitely excited for it, and we've received a lot of great comments on the use of the courts and just how they look. So yeah.
This may be a dumb question, but how do we determine for like those courts or our tennis courts when we pull out the nets? Like, is it for snowfall, or is it the temperature? Is it just October we take that so they don't get ruined?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is the same for tennis courts, basketball courts, etc. Typically, that's done closer to the end of the summer, and I don't have a specific date, but typically it aligns with the weather and the snowfall.
Terrific. All right. Victoria is going to be the pickleball capital of the world. All right. Anything else from council? All right. There are no more items to come before the body this evening, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
We have a motion by Councilmember Gunderson.
Second.
We have a second by Councilmember Roberts. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned.